Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us for yet another incredibly informative and insightful webinar of our The Next Big Thing series. My name's Julia Riley. I'm your moderator for today's episodes. We do hope that you're as excited as we are for today's webinar. Now, today's topic is behind the scenes of digital payment industry. We couldn't have asked for a better guest speaker today than Arthur Wong. Arthur brings solid experience and capability across both startup and large-scale enterprise software and technology environments. He has a track record of implementing new product initiatives across competitive markets. Well, currently, he is heading up the AIS vertical at Terabut Gateway. That's in the MENA region. And prior to joining TG, he was employed at WorldPay and FIS, delivering financial products across North America and APAC. His payment experience has also contributed in roles at HSBC and Monzo. You know, now more than ever, technology is taking over payments. We saw a huge acceleration in the shift from physical to digital channels and from cash to card, other electronic or digital payment methods. In this webinar, Arthur will discuss innovation as part of digital necessity. Now, this is an interactive session, so we do invite you to ask any questions. We will have time for Q&A towards the end of our webinar, so be asking any questions that you might have. All right, Arthur, I'll go ahead and turn it on over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Julia. You're very kind. And hi, guys. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. Really, really excited to have a chat with you about payments and the more important thing about, D2C. This is a very, very important shift within the online payment industry, especially when we're so used to using intermediaries like marketplaces and everything like that. So let's go back to basics first and understand actually what is direct to customer model itself. But before we even do that, I want to take it back to the fundamental aspect is what is the goal of payments? Now, before I go into it, I want to ask everyone on the chat, what is your perspective of payments itself? If you have any ideas, just type it out. To be fair, it's relatively simple. So let's go for a quick explanation. Now, payment on its own is very simple. A payment is simply the act where party A provides monetary value to party B in exchange for a product and a service. So you can see on the slide, in the days of cash, this was really simple because there's only two parties. And as a result, it was very, very quick where, instantly exchange services and cash. And there's a high level of trust because you can see each other. However, of course, the downside is you got physical barriers. And of course, it's inconvenience as well. So the ability to scale is also limited, right? And there's also a high infrastructure cost, not from the payment side, but from, having stores and everything else. Now, with digital payments rolling in, this has completely reversed the entirety, right? You have a great scalability. The internet is king, right? You can reach anyone across the world, right? It's great to see everyone from India, Pakistan, and from Dubai and UAE. So it's amazing. However, as a seller myself, this becomes the barrier whereby speed of delivering it and of course trust, because with the internet, I don't know who is at the end of it. And to be fair, from a customer's perspective, I don't know who's at the end of the screen selling items to myself as well. And as a result, this is really, really important for us to break down the barrier itself. So between the early 2010s, the basic online payment journey we know is very, very simple. There's simply authorization, there's the settlement, reconciliation, and then fees. I'll explain all of them in a second. And if you're unlucky, of course, you have to deal with the chargebacks, refund, and fraud. Now, as all individuals, as customers, we may have actually experienced all parts of these. Now, before I break them down, in the chat, I'm really interested to know, have you, as an individual, been part of a seller or somewhere in the payment experience other than a customer yourself? Or if not, we're mostly, so for an example, I worked in the payment industry. So of course I've been on the other side and I'm trying to unveil the mask to you guys, but have you guys been selling things online before? Have you received such problems? It'll be good to find out. I'll continue, but feel free to type out in the chat box if you've got any experience as well. Customer, yeah, most of us have been a customer, understandable. So let's break it down. Authorization. This is actually the most important first step. Oh, sold a few digital print online. That's great. That's great. Absolutely. Probably use the marketplace and things like that. So these could help us as individuals. Now, actually, this is great because as an individual, if you're only thinking of selling a couple things, maybe reselling your furniture or maybe selling your artwork or maybe a simple service itself, you don't want to spend too much time on it because this is your side gig or a hustle. As a result, marketplaces, whether it's Facebook Marketplace, Amazon, Speed Bunny, all these things are there to basically help you to enable you to exchange your goods and your services. And exchange, they will help you get the monetary value from your customers to you, but of course taking a fee. Now, usually that fee itself is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. However, you look at it percentage-wise, it does grow bigger and bigger. So let's say you want to start a shop full-time. Let's say I want to sell pens and stationery, for example. What if you want your side hustle to become your main hustle? Exactly, that's really important. So you're devoting all your energy to it. And actually, the simplicity of business is making sure that, you could sustain it. And that's what it is, right? And sustaining means profitability, and profitability means that you want a margin. Margin is one of the most important things in a business, which is hugely looked over because we always care about revenue, revenue, revenue. However, what is the cost itself? And as we're so used to cash itself before, when you're on the other side, rather than giving out the money itself, when you're receiving it, you realize that there's a lot of service charges that are taking out your margins and making it thinner and thinner and thinner. So over this series, I'm going to actually walk you through what's the best way to choose your payment partners, how you can improve your customer experience, and overall what you need to look forward to the beginning, which is actually, yes, what payment option do you have? What can you choose? How can you enhance your payment journey right now from an experience standpoint? And then what do you do for the future? So going back to this, you have your authorization, which is essentially taking the trust, improving the trust, and taking the barrier that is blocking the trust. By having an intermediary, we could basically approve who you are. So that's the authorization part. Settlement itself is essentially whether you have enough funds for that, for the bank to actually then approve any of the payment itself. And reconciliation, there's actually an extra step because a lot of banks, card schemes, they're holding the money for you on your behalf, and as a result, reconciliation is the method where they're giving out back to you, and so you could basically take out the money. And fees, of course, which is part of reconciliation, it breaks down all the things that you have, and fees are the ones that you see. For example, if you're selling a pen for $1 itself, they may take a 25p charge off, and as a result, that they will take that off as part of the fees itself. Now, refund and chargeback itself, all of these are money coming in, which is great. However, that is grayed out. However, in the blacks, that's where money is going out, unfortunately. And that's what, as a seller from a D2C model, you want to make sure that you reduce and reduce and reduce, essentially. So refund itself is, if I'm a customer, I bought a pen, I'd like to basically change my mind. And of course, with regulations across different regions, sometimes you have 28 days, 30 days, sometimes you don't have the ability to refund. It depends on the product and the service that is regulated by the local region itself. But refund is basically a amicable agreement between the seller and the merchant to basically return the service or return the product in exchange return of the monetary value itself. A chargeback is slightly different, where you could imagine it almost becomes like another layer where it's slightly unpleasant because either something went wrong or the buyer's not really happy about it. And as a result, and sometimes it could be even that because they're not familiar with the transaction. And I'll go into that later. So sometimes when you look in your bank account and you see a long line of text that is gibberish, you have no idea what that means, and you would initiate a chargeback. That means that you're going back to the bank account and saying, I don't recognize this, I want my money back, and help me fight that. And as a seller myself, this would be hugely impactful because if I'm not clear explaining it, for example, like a receipt to the customer may reject it, and as a result, I'm losing out on both ends. So that's one thing I'm going to teach, how we could basically reduce chargebacks. And finally, fraud, of course, one of the most important things with movies, talking about all the, hacking and with news talking about, with crypto, for an example, having, hackers taking millions off accounts. Fraud is one of the biggest things, a biggest enemy of a seller, and that is something that we want to attack too. But I know that I've been talking a lot. One thing I want to just highlight the benefits of a direct to consumer model, which is D2C. What is the benefit? Why are we taking you from, selling from a marketplace or using other intermediaries to sell your product or service? Why are we promoting you to shift from that model to a direct to consumer model? So there's a couple of benefits and I want to talk about it, right? Number one itself, and it's already in the name itself, direct. So that's no middleman. So there's more profits, higher margins itself. Number two, gaining access to more target customer data. Now that's really important. So I'm going to go into the next slide itself, the four-party model, and I'll explain a little bit to it. But you will have more target customer data, which is really important for you to understand your audience itself, to expand your product range, or even to refine it, right? And with nowadays a higher degree of personalization, so you have control, right? Back in the day, let's use something simple. Let's say I'm a dairy farm and I produce milk itself. All right. Most of the time, we would directly buy it from a supermarket, right? From UK, you have Tesco's, Waitrose, Asda, and US, you have Walmart, for an example. And in Dubai, for an example, just came back, you have Carrefour, of course, in Europe as well. So these are intermediaries. However, what that means is they would understand their customer. But however, as a producer myself, I will have absolutely no idea because I'm not dealing with the customers directly. So if I directly sell to the customers, I have a higher degree of personalization. For an example, the supermarkets themselves may understand that people may have a desire for chocolate milk or strawberry milk. And these are things that I could do, but to be fair, I will have no idea. So that is something that I could basically get more understanding of. And we'll go into that deeper in a minute as well. Again, higher control over profits because you understand the service fees, and I'll go through why in this model it is so good and so bad at the same time. And of course, more room for product testing itself. Now, so far, let's see if there's any questions. Some good questions here. Let me take a look. The ever-changing digital payment landscape demands for business to regularly adapt. What are the measures business should take to tackle this challenge? Really good question. So we need to actually get the metrics itself and understand what you should do. And I have a couple slides to talk about that. So bear in mind with that. True fraud is the biggest thing right now. Absolutely. And actually, as I talk about the acquirers as well, there are limitations to the amount of fraud that you could do, which limits to the accounts, the banks that you could use, which have better services as well. Okay, so if you look at this model, this is called the four-party model, and it's infamous in the payment journey, in the payment industry at all. But if you take a look at the diagram itself, it is very deceiving because there's actually 5 stakeholders there, right? There's the cardholder, that's us. There's the merchant, which is the seller, right? Now, back in the cash days, right, you will have the exchange between cardholder and merchant only. However, if you can see in this diagram itself, this is not the case. So if I walk you through, so us as a cardholder, we will initiate. So let's say I'm selling milk. I don't know why I'm coming up with this topic, but let's say milk. I want to buy milk directly from the merchant itself. So naturally, I would pay with a card. Now, this could be point of sale, but more importantly in this world, let's say digital, so online itself, right? Now, regardless of the different payment methods we'll talk about later, I pay. What actually happens is through the merchant, they'll be utilizing something called a payment gateway itself. Now, a payment gateway is the surface level where they do all the authorization self, ensuring that you have you are the right identity of that cardholder, just the surface level checks. It also allows a merchant to accept a more variety of card, which we'll go through in a bit. Right, this afterwards would be sending the data to an acquirer. Now, an acquirer itself could be a bank itself, or it could be a payment provider, which is what we'll talk about later. An acquirer itself would deal with it, do the settlement side. They would then send it to the card scheme itself. Now, acquirers are the banks, so anything from like JP Morgan Chase itself, HSBC, all that stuff, they're there. Card schemes, who are they? So you've got the Visa cards, MasterCards alike. Now, Visa and MasterCards are the most infamous globally. They take up 75% of the card scheme volume in the entire world itself. Now, lesser known are, of course, UnionPay from China all the way, You got Ryu from India as well, on East Africa as well. And you've got JCB from Japan, of course. So all of these are card schemes which enable the transfer of money from acquirer to issuer. So basically allows a secure communication of money flow. And of course, the issuer, which is the initial cardholder's bank. And this goes all the way back from the approval and then comes back to the merchant itself. But the key thing, which is why this is not as beneficial to direct consumer models as you think, is because if you look at the arrows, you're paying interchange fee, you're paying scheme fee, and there's additional interchange fee between the acquirer and the issuer itself. And there's possibly card fee from the cardholder to the issuer. Now, as day-to-day customers, you'd say, oh, this is great. If I use my credit card or debit card, I get cash back, for example, or I get this discount. Where do you think this money is coming from? Money, unfortunately, is not free. It will always come back from somewhere. And unfortunately, the person that always has to pay and fork out that monetary value is the merchant themselves. All these interchange fees and schemes fees are often put back on the merchant to do. And that's why sometimes when you're on the street itself, you would understand that some merchant would say, we would only accept cards above a certain level, or we would only accept certain card schemes, like we will accept Visa and MasterCard, but we won't accept Amex. The reason is because Visa and MasterCard, for example, have a lower interchange fee and a lower scheme fee. This itself, for example, would be like 0.2%, which is minuscule. However, American Express, which let's call it's a bit of a premium itself, because American Express card is both a card scheme and an acquirer at the same time, which then forms the three-party model. They can provide you a faster checkout experience. However, they have a much higher charge fee, up to 2 to 3% sometimes. And as a result, can you imagine if I'm selling something for £100 and I'd lose 2 to £3 straight off just because I have to pay the interchange fee? That's a huge hit, especially as you scale up, if you sell 1,000 of these items. And as a result, this comes into the handle bundle. What does that mean? So as a seller yourself, as a merchant, you could reach out to each individual parties to get this sorted. So you could get a terminal, you could get a gateway, for an example, that deals with Visa specifically, deal with MasterCard specifically, and deal with this specific bank. This is great in a sense, which gives you a lot of customization. But if you're starting up newly, this is a very, very complex process, and also a lot of high initial setup cost fee. So as a result, payment service providers exist. So you may have heard the likes of WorldPay, FIS. You may have heard of Adyen, Stripe. These are, Stripe was the Adyen and Stripe are sort of the startups. These are very, very, these are payment service provider which have essentially bundled up majority of these manual process and tasks that you have to do as a merchant and sell it to you as a service itself. Now, of course, they could cut it out and do it separately, but this essentially allows a merchant to easier sell. So as a merchant, no matter whether your customer comes to you using a MasterCard or Visa card or American Express, you can accept it, which on the downside, you may potentially pay a higher fee. You have essentially broadened the audience that would come for your product itself. And that's why sometimes when you're thinking about your own product, it's really, really important to understand what suits you. Do you see blockchain technology impacting the digital payment environment? Now, I'll talk a little bit about that. The answer is yes and no. Blockchain is a buzzword. However, at its current technological pace, blockchain isn't fast enough. If you think about it, currently, I can from my experience at WorldPay, for an example, we have processed 2 billion transactions just for UK a year itself. And actually, globally, we've done more than 12 trillion transactions. So you can imagine the volume that comes through our processing day in and day out. However, blockchain technology is very secure because of its technology. It makes sure that every chunk is unchangeable. And as a result, there's a secure ledger that you can follow. And as a merchant, as a bank, as a customer, you have a clear understanding of where the money has gone to. However, it's not fast enough, and the processing power takes a bit longer. So yes, I believe that blockchain does and will have an impact in the digital payment environment in the future. But at the moment, it's still in its infancy. So it is coming.
Next question for you, Art. Does the adoption of digital payment methods help businesses save cost? And if yes, then how?
Great question. So it does, in a sense. So first thing first, you have to understand what do you mean by saving cost and what your current situation is. So and I was a hypocrite in a sense where I said there was no cost when using cash. There is the cost of cash. For an example, storing cash, going to the bank, depositing it, holding it, security fees and everything like that. Those costs add up itself. So as a seller itself, you need to identify what is the biggest outcome for you. So are you trying to scale up? So if you're trying to scale up itself, what type of do you have to expand your metrics? Actually, let me answer this question really quickly. This is completely going against all the things that we're going for, but let's talk about this. This journey essentially will allow you to understand how you want to scale up itself. I've essentially highlighted the first part and one of the actually most important part of the digital journey itself. These are essentially the steps of your checkout journey. For your first two parts, adding to cart, viewing shopping cart, those are allowing you to expand your audience itself. Shipping methods and payment methods, those by aggregating the data, using third parties, or allowing you to find partners willing to work for you at a great fee, will allow you to save that cost itself, because the journey itself is simplified. And one of the most important thing right now, it's always value, and customer experience. That's the key thing itself. So if you let me sort of walk through. So adding to cart, what does that mean? Let's be honest, there's nothing more simple to that. Your main goal, you always have to think, excluding all the fancy designs and everything like that, what do you want your audience to do? What do you want your customer to do? You want your customer to select the things that you're selling, whether it's a service or product, and press add to cart. So that's the thing. So with add cart, there's two advice I'd give. Make sure that your add to cart button is in clear view, and then you can choose your right color and right logo designs. They may sound very, very minute and silly advices, but they're very key. If you have, for example, a white background, but you have a red add to cart, it draws the eye. It's simple human logic. Basically, if you're making it unclear, people won't know what to do. However, if you're something alarming, they'll just press, add to cart. So essentially, choose the right color for you to add to the cart button. It's a minor thing, but it's a big thing in terms of conversion rate as well. Now, viewing the shopping cart, what does that mean? So when you press the viewing cart, you want to see the list of itself, right? So what can you do to improve that experience? You can align your mobile checkout process with your business goals. Now, I've sort of jumped a couple slides ahead, right? One of the most important things you have to do is understand your demographic audience itself. Is it the younger generation? Is it the older generation? To be fair, it doesn't mind. You need to make sure that the payment method you're offering aligns to your demographic, right? So if you have if you're offering a product that is for more senior people, and senior people have a tendency to liking cash itself, then let's be honest, you could be having the sexiest, most streamlined, advanced digital payment method, but your audience doesn't use it, then you're wasting money, and therefore it doesn't save you costs. So therefore it really ties back to what is your purpose itself. However, if let's say majority with digital payments wise, we're offering it to a younger generation. So what do younger generations tend to use as well? It's mobile phones. Our mobile phone devices are used a lot more than laptops. As a result, one of the key things is make sure that your mobile checkout experience is aligned, right? I don't know whether you've still seen it. Sometimes if you go on some website, it is basically exact one-to-one match of your desktop. And because of the smaller screen size, you have to keep scrolling. You might have to go find around. The click buttons are too small. It's a really poor experience. And that, to be fair, I really can't be asked, and I might go to someone else's, some other brand with a better user experience. So make sure that a mobile experience is great, but of course, understand your users first, right? So mobile checkout layout page is really key, important. And this probably will be, I don't know whether, I think this is a very undiscussed topic from a user experience perspective. Keep your goal above the fold. And what does that mean? Essentially, if you're looking at your screen, right, you want all the important details to be right there straight away. Yes, you can scroll and you could click onto another page, but the act of scrolling itself means that the user is interested in the first part of what you're telling them. So if you keep everything there, you can capture their attention straight away, and you've won the whole part. If you don't, then that's literally gone itself. So make sure you keep your goal above the fold. Now, next step is the shipping and billing details itself. Now, I'm slightly diverging away from payments, as you can see, the actual process, and we'll dive back deep to later, but it's really important. Shipping and billing details is really important. You must make sure that you leverage out the communication, leverage the layout to communicate important information, such as, how these are things, the weight or whatever. And this is the beauty as well. Please leverage return customer data for a quick checkout experience. And that is why I was so passionate talking about, whether you should contact a payment gateway and, design it yourself, or whether you should work with, I don't know, like say Squarespace or Wix, who design the website checkout experience already and integrate a payment experience with Stripe, for example. These are very important, because if you are able to leverage customer data to return, so let's say customer A has come in and bought some stuff from you, and as a result, you know their name, you know their address, and you know what they've bought, because these are all within regulations for you to have. You know that, okay, actually there's multiple people wanting product A, and maybe I should either stock up more, or maybe I should provide more. But more importantly, if you know that they're coming back, you must have heard one-click checkout. These are really important things, because straight away, as a customer, my journey has been frictionless, and as a result, I'm more willing to return to you. So as a result, shipping and billing details, make sure that they're really, really clear and simple. And as a result, this links to the shipping method itself. One of the things I would often advise our customer itself is link your shipping options to cost itself. I don't know whether any of you guys are, but as an avid Amazon user, the free delivery cost itself is one of the most priceless thing ever to me, because if I see it like add $2.99 for delivery or add £30 for delivery, to me it puts me off my appetite, and I don't really want to purchase that item itself, because I feel cheated upon. Whereas actually, if you sell, let's say the product is £30 and the delivery cost is £20, you just sell the product for £50 itself. So as an individual, I'll say, you know what, I've come to term £50 itself, and that's it. And as a result, if you have a good journey, everything else is sorted. However, if a user sort of sees £30 and say, great, follow the payment journey itself, but then sees £20 I have to pay in addition, they feel like they have to commit another payment. Essentially, this is another payment on top of it. So as a result, if you have the ability to integrate the shipping cost into your overall cost and show it as one whole unit, that will win your audience over by tenfold. Trust me for that. And as a result, build convenience in the checkout process. That's really important. One of the most important things with checkout itself is understanding what payment methods to deliver. Now, this goes back to a couple of slides over here, different types of payment methods. And I'll explain about these icons in a second. So the most common experience, of course, you have is a debit card and a credit card itself. However, the amount of payment methods are a lot more. There are e-wallets itself, there's subscription, there's bank-to-bank payments, and in the future, there's even open bank payments, which is what I'm currently working on and have a huge passion about. Now, going back to payment itself, you have to understand, what do I offer? Do I offer everything? So in the payment option, do I say I take Visa card, MasterCard, JCB, Amex, and all the wallets below? No, because from a user experience wise, this is what we call choice paralysis, because as a user, I look at it, there's too many choices, I actually can't choose. So what we advise is maybe choose the top 3 to 5 payment methods that majority of your audience likes to use. And as a result, that's quick and easy. Now, we know majority of the fact it's going to be a MasterCard and Visa card because of the availability. However, actually, this is a beautiful slide that I identified, and I have to say, we found this when I was working with Adyen itself. This is a breakdown of how the world likes to pay itself. Now, I don't know how clear it is, but essentially it breaks down to local cards, wallets, prepaid card, online banking itself, cash, invoice installments, direct debit, and global schemes itself. Now, from a North American standpoint and a European standpoint itself, we love credit. Credit is one of the most beautiful things in the world, and as a result, the global schemes are are absolutely amazing over here. However, you have the Netherlands, for example. The Netherlands are very infamous for avoiding credit as much as possible. So as a result, you get a lot of bank transfers and bank payments itself. So you have to understand what type of solution are offered in that region or your audience itself, and that's what you would present yourself. For example, in East Africa, you have mToro. What that means is, unfortunately, because of the banking infrastructure there is less advanced, what happens is they have the way to bypass it by using mobile. So by using mobile payments itself, by using the mobile network itself, you can exchange credits easily. And for people, again, what does that equate to? A seamless journey itself of transferring monetary value for a product as well. So you need to understand your geography as well, and that sort of answers, avoiding the payment choice paralysis by limiting the options itself. Another thing itself is allowing quick fixes. How many times have you accidentally entered the wrong data and it comes up with an error screen, and when you select back, you can't do all those changes? Make sure that you allow a user to change things easily to enable, a payment to go through as well. And one of the more important things, which often gets overlooked because we don't use white labeling. White labeling, by the way, is a term to allow the checkout process to have your own company brand style as well. And this allows people to understand. So let me talk a little bit about that. One of the most important thing is actually what I was trying to tell is reassure your customer on the security and privacy, right? At all times as a customer, I am entrusting this service that you're hosting to take my payment securely, not more, not less, and exchange for a product and service. So all the time, please make sure that you're reassuring this, that this is, whatever security, whatever privacy measure, make sure, your data is PII protected, we're GDPR compliant, so on and so forth. However, what I'm saying doesn't mean that you should plaster them all across your screen, because of course that would cause confusion, and the user experience is poor. But at all point, maybe at the end, like at a subheader, just try to say, these are things that we are keeping aware, we're keeping things safe. So as a user, at all points, I understand what's happening, right? So that's very important itself. And jumping back to the last couple bits, of course, is order review. I'll quickly jump through this because I'm conscious of time as well. You have to differentiate the order review from the receipt and invoice. That's one of the key things I constantly see. As some of the customers would come to me, they would showcase, oh, this is what we have for the order review page. And as a user, you go like, have I paid this already? Is the receipt there? I can't actually understand what I've selected. So make sure that they're different, and then ensure that the place order button is in clear view so that you understand, so your customer understands at what point they are at. Have they bought? Have they purchased that yet? Have they placed the order yet? And that's very important. And lastly, that's more important, and we can definitely have a chat about, is whether it's guest checkout, whether it's single sign-on checkout flow, as in like returning sign-on flow. And more importantly, I want you to ask yourself is, when should you require for an account creation? Please don't make people sign up for the sake of signing up. This would drive people away. Every action that you do for the checkout journey, you want to make sure that there is a value and an outcome from it. So what's the value of having an account creation, right? You can understand your users better. But could you have other things to make sure you understand users better? Could you create a loyalty program scheme instead? And then through that, you can then incentivize them for creating an account. Don't create buzzwords and don't create accounts for the sake of doing that. Sometimes even a single sign-on via Facebook, Google, or Apple Pay would be great. Now, each of them have their unique standpoints, right? Everyone uses Google, not everyone uses Apple, for an example. So as a result, it's better. However, the fee they charge you are slightly different, right? And of course, the level of information that you're asking for. Google, for an example, collects a wealth of information. Apple provides you a higher conversion rate sometimes because of the quality that they're doing. However, they don't really pass you much of the user data back because of their their strength of privacy. So these are very, very important aspects for you to understand in a general journey itself. So let me see if I can answer more questions, because these are great.
That was relative to that. Do you think that some platforms lose customers due to that account creation norm?
100% itself. So basically, if you're not a returning customer, or if you don't think you're a returning customer, 80% of the people who go online and check out would select guest checkout because it's the easiest, it's the fastest way. So as a result, it honestly is, right? It's just simple. Why if you don't foresee, let's be honest, you would only create an account if you foresee yourself coming back to it, or unless you're heavily incentivized for it, right? If you're offering me a potential draw for X amount of cash, or a, let's say, 100% discount or a 90% discount, it incentivizes me to do that because I'm saying, great, I might come back to this because of this and that. However, if you're not giving them an option for guest checkout and just purely create an account because I need your details and such, I'm not going to do that. And actually, this is a really, really interesting thing that I was talking with my colleagues as well. I saw one of the comments just now was talking about security. Security is very, very important. However, at what cost? Between the 2000 and 2010, payment industry have put security over user experience. Now, driving this back to customer, to the customer account creation itself. How many times have you created an account before, gone off, done something else, come back, and then you type in your account and then you've forgotten your password? And then afterwards you go back, you go, yeah, should I press forget password and do that all over again? Or should I just say, no, I'm just going to do it some other time? That's the key thing. And so as a result, from a security standpoint, just let the customer change it on the spot and just say forget password. Don't need them to verify. So because what is the endpoint? They really just want to get to they just really want to buy the things. Do you think Web 2 is going to vanish too? Sometimes or never. It will vanish like how Web 1 sort of is gone, right? It will go eventually and we will transform ourselves, and that's where we have a bit more control of our data. That's where open banking comes in, but not right now. And it also depends on each region as well. Actually, I'll go on to that topic in a bit, but just finishing up the security standpoint is, if you have the control, try to understand where you want to implement your security measures and where do you want to sacrifice that for a higher conversion rate itself. And that's what you need to balance. And jumping back into this model, for an example, if your business is associated to anything risky, such as gambling, or if you have a past record of having a high chargeback rate, a high refund rate, or such, or a low authorization rate, acquirers may put up your interchange fee in exchange for the constant work that they have to do to send money backwards and forwards. So unfortunately, as much as you think that they work with you, you have to be constantly mindful of the limitations. So let's say Visa card and MasterCard, there's often a 1% chargeback limit for customers. What does that mean? If, let's say, I've got 100 customers, if I've got more than 1% customers asking for chargeback within a certain amount of time, usually it's within a month itself, Visa and MasterCard would basically fine you for doing all those action itself. So that itself is really, really important for you to understand the security measure versus the authorization approval rates, for an example. So yeah, so Web 2 vanish sometime soon. Do I personally trade in cryptocurrency? I do own some cryptocurrency itself, but do I, well, find, trade, or invest in it, right? I personally don't really trade into it because of the high volatility of some of the coins itself. And yes, we are seeing a high adoption rate in cryptocurrencies and from some users. However, because of the high volatility, it can't be used easily as a fiat fund as well. A fiat fund is your US dollars, your GBP, your Chinese yen, essentially anything that's relatively stable itself. But so yes, I really want to talk about Web 2 and sort of the Web 3 and how data is going to flow itself. So if I go into the last page itself, what is the future? Now, this is a very biased opinion, of course, because I'm in the industry working within it. Within UK, the open banking regulation that is branched off from PSD2 and SCA, strong customer authentication, open banking is a regulatory-led initiative over here. What does that mean? It essentially allows the users, such as myself, you guys, who own the bank data, to have control over it. When I say own, you don't restrict it you choose and you have the ability to consent to basically provide it to a certain secure third party, which essentially allows to use the data to make your financial life easier itself. So you can see sort of in this diagram, a lot of the stakeholders that we saw in the four-party model has been disappeared. All it is between the shop itself and the bank. So you can see on e-commerce whatever you want to buy, in this case a t-shirt itself. All you want to do is basically link your bank account up itself between the shop and the bank itself. You consent it, and then essentially it's just a bank transfer in its very essence, which is a lot more simpler than going through the card scheme and everything like that. So as a result, the less parties involved, the higher the margin the shopper has, and as a result, this would also drive products to be slightly cheaper because you no longer have to raise the margin to overcompensate, and as a result, it's better for the overall economy as well. And this is what I believe in the future that Web3 would come along as well as part of the open banking initiative, because through open banking, this is the railway that you're replacing the old traditional card scheme. But then, yes, that's where you can leverage on the blockchain effect, depending on the speed it is itself. But you can essentially leverage on blockchain to manage and manage the ledger that is tracking the payments between banks and shop. And as a result, creating a much faster experience, yet allowing you as the user to save your journey, save your experience, save your data, for example, your preferences, and share it to selective individuals, so you have a better control of what's going through. Creating NFTs is fun. Have you yet? I have not created an NFT. I am really crap at drawing, so I don't know if you can see much. My writing is absolutely horrible, so I can't really draw. But it's definitely one thing I'd love to give it a try. How do you see evolving shift towards mobile point of sale technology? Yes, I'm so glad, SA, you've asked this question. During pandemic, everyone was going to say, yes, we're all going to migrate to e-commerce and e-commerce only. But of course, as we've seen, us as humans, we do crave, people-to-people interaction. So you will have that in-person experience again. And you may have heard this terminology, omni-channel. Omni-channel is very, very important because you basically create one single experience, but support the payment experience, both from a physical journey itself and a online experience. And this is where then account creation is important, right? Because as an account creation, you as a seller, I understand how often my customer would like to be in person or when they'd like to go online, of course. And that depends on the context again. But mobile point of sale is becoming more important. You have Honeywell devices, and even with Apple's coming up with, of course, the new point of sale where, because of NFC chips, you can essentially pay with Apple Pay. Why can you reverse it? And that's something that they've created. It's coming out soon. Although, there's a bit of controversy with monopolizing the region itself, but it is definitely something that we could hope to reduce and minimize the friction itself. You could use Square at the moment. That's really popular, faster checkout. They do have a higher fee sometimes compared to more traditional payment POS system itself. But in honesty, very happy to chat, but it really depends on on the context itself. And actually, a lot of questions are talking about the context, and let me address it because I have a slide for it. So this is a whole bunch of gibberish if you look at the icon itself. But this simple 6-icon diagram would answer the question of the different types of payment methods and when to use it. So for an example, if you look at a car is what we'd call a high-value item itself. As a result, the majority of people are unlikely to pay it using an e-wallet or direct debit because of insufficient funds. So as a result, you're most likely to understand that they will use some sort of credit-related payment fee. So anything from a credit card itself, BNPL, buy now, pay later initiative like Klarna, as such, or pay in installments. These are the payment methods you would probably think to implement for your customers because that's your general audience properties. However, you have something like Netflix, for an example, which are a lot smaller items. This is where then you could implement items such as reoccurring payment via bank transfer, direct debits, for an example. These are very, very important because rather than having a customer manually enter their details every single month or every single week, depending on when you want to charge them recurringly. This automates it and allows them to have that freedom. Essentially, I could just do it once and forget about it and know that there's that constant charge itself. So this is super important as well. By using bank-to-bank payments, this is really important also for D2C and B2B or B2C as well. Often with D2C models, B2B models, you're still utilizing the bank payments via card scheme in Rails, so Amex, Visa card, MasterCard. However, if you involve treasury, depending on the size of your company, of course, but for some of your small, medium enterprises which have a small treasury department, if you can, try leverage, direct debit more. Try to leverage reoccurring payment through bank transfers, because these would significantly reduce your payment fee per transaction and allow you to have a higher margin. So that's a tip from a treasury perspective if you want to try and implement them, depending on your customer bases. Now, of course, like I said, if you're selling a car and you're implementing this method, you're limiting your audience that could use this method to pay the car. So it really is, again, contextual as well. That's very, very important. I think I'm going to miss exchange currency notes in the future. Yes, I can agree as well. TransferWise and all these stuff are working on some cool stuff. How can business shield themselves from illegal financing and money laundering, especially with a rise in digital payments? I can't. That's a great question. I can't really answer that from a cryptocurrency perspective because it's still highly unregulated and it's still definitely evolving. But for traditional payment methods wise, that's one thing you could be rest assured, because most of the payment card scheme, they have to abide by the law. So they already have done your KYB. So KYB is know your business itself. So as a merchant, when I sign up, I have to do this lengthy process to basically ensure that I'm no political affiliation to a specific barred individual, or I'm not subject to any sanctions, for an example. And this is also done when a card is being issued, which is showed in the four-party model, where when a card is issued to you, so for example, you look at your card, it could be a Visa card, it could be MasterCard, but it probably is given out by a specific bank. It could be, for an example, in Bahrain, it could be Rakbank, it could be NBB, in KSA, it could be SAB, in US, it could be Chase, in UK, it could be HSBC. I'm just trying to think as many banks I could, as an example. But yeah, essentially that is, they will have done a lot of these checks on behalf of the merchant and the cardholder customer to do that. And that's why open banking is really important, because people have already done that check itself. And as a result, during the checkout process, during the purchasing process itself, you don't have to do it again. And that's a whole step that we're eliminating, allowing you to, again, have a faster checkout process. Money laundering itself. So the only thing I want you to look out for is probably gift cards. So gift card is one of the more, it's a double-edged sword. A gift card is great because, for an example, this is a case study. Starbucks, if I ask you what does Starbucks do, you would all say Starbucks create coffee, create drinks and all that stuff, which it is. However, if you think about the actual cash flow that Starbucks has on hand, Starbucks is actually now a bank, not legally, but it's actually a bank, because many of you will probably have either purchased or received Starbucks gift cards at certain points of time, either as little gifts and tokens, or just because it's easy and you can collect the points as well. Now, the beauty of these is essentially you're exchanging your existing cash for a future product that you're going to purchase. Whereas what that means is Starbucks is holding on massive amount of money for themselves, for them to then do more innovation, enrich their own services, do investings or trading, whatever, so that they could basically amass and increase their cash flow in its own. So you yourself could do that as a business as well, but depending on what your customer would like. But to answer that question, because how non-regulated gift cards are, anyone could just purchase them. That's where, of course, the money is a bit harder to track, right? I could just use cash, go into a supermarket, exchange the cash for a gift card, then buy it online as a result. But as a seller, you don't have to worry, because that is no longer your responsibility. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's not your responsibility. But that is one aspect that is slightly harder to regulate. But overall, from a merchant, as a seller perspective, by partnering up with a lot of the either payment service providers or partnering with acquirers, they would have naturally done the KYBs, KYCs, and fraud fixes for you already. So that's great. Let me check if there's any more questions.
I'm just going back to the questions a little bit there. And we got about 5 minutes remaining. So Arthur, I'll let you select.
Yeah, let's do it. Which payment option is the safest for everyday uses? Oh my goodness. What payment option is safest for everyday uses? Are you asking that from an individual, or are you talking about a merchant perspective? I'm really interested to know that. But just in case, if in time, I'll answer both in a sense. If you are a customer as an individual, I would always say the best option is credit. And of course, I'm coming from a biased perspective, but credit means you're not using your own money. As a result, they are the credit company, whether whoever is lending you the money, will always fight harder for you, essentially, if there's a chargeback or a refund or anything like that, because it's their money itself. So it's definitely safer itself. And also, if there's any fraud, it's not on you as well. So that's a barrier to that as well. Now, I could easily flip that as a merchant itself. As a merchant, if you're taking credit cards, you're increasing the number of audience that are going to buy your stuff, but there you're also potentially increasing the chances that they would ask for a refund or chargeback and such. And as a result, you have to pay actually higher fee, not only to return your product to yourself, but also to give the money back and a little bit more to the banks as well. So that's less good. So as a merchant wise, the ideal way, which is not always possible, of course, is a bank transfer. The cheapest, the easiest way to do that. But of course, it's limiting for now. Two sides of the same coin. Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. So let's take a look at more. Wix, use Wix for digital print. Yes, absolutely. So you're 100% right. My advice is, as a seller, if you're layering loads of service on top of each other, you're naturally paying minute bits in between each of these chunks, but it does add up. So if you're doing it for a side hustle like we discussed, it's fine. But as a main business itself, you want to reduce the number of stakeholders. Number one, for easy of management, and number two, cut out all these margins that you're having. And it's
Arthur, this one's interesting. How do you see the adoption of biometric payment systems evolving?
Oh yes, that is amazing. So for UK wise, let me use a real life example as well. You could go physically to a supermarket, you could check out, let's say, a bottle of wine itself. However, the number of times they would constantly ask you for ID, and you go, oh crap, I didn't bring my ID because I pay with my phone now. That is really, really encumbered and a huge blocker. There are plenty of digital tools such as Yoti, for an example, which basically does biometric scanning right online, and it basically serves as a metric to support payments like that, for example, wine, gambling, as for age verification. That's one example. But for a general biometrics, I mean, maybe with PSD2 and within the EEA, within Europe, you may have experienced two-factor authentication a lot more. So rather than often typing in password or your mother's maiden name as such, they often redirect you back to the bank app itself and have a facial identification to reference, or a fingerprint, depending on the device you have. That itself is a lot faster itself. So how important is facial biometrics? Very, very important, and it's heavily utilized in the future and today purchases as well. So that's why Apple Pay and Google Pay are so forefront and being used by millennials now as well. What is the best platform to sell products as a side hustle to reduce margins? Any suggestions? I'm not the biggest expert in that. I would say now, as you know, Shopify and Etsy, they actually take huge. Yes, good suggestion. They actually take a huge margin chunk because you're essentially exchanging the convenience for monetary value. I would say a better way could be setting up your own website and then working with a particular payment provider. Now, this then depends on the region itself, right? And also one thing I forgot to say, I know I've got 1 minute left. There's so much I want to talk, maybe next time. But it's with payment providers, sometimes they have the benefit of having the connections with domestic with domestic players as well. What that means is with domestic players, you could accept payments globally rather than domestically as well. And as a result, you could utilize the domestic railway and have cheaper interchange fees and exchange rates as well. So with Etsy, for an example, they give you a blanket rate. What is Etsy, like 3% or something? Or was that Shopify? They take like 2.95% plus like 0.25p per transaction or something like that. And as a result, it's quite high. So if you're able to negotiate with a specific provider itself, or even a specific issue or scheme, you can definitely get a cheaper rate itself.
Arthur, so much value here in this session. I know you could go on and on. That there's so many questions that have come in, but thank you so much for your time. It was an excellent session. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, thank you very much for all coming, and I love the interaction and love the questions. This has been really great to just share. And
yeah, that's a nice comment there. Great listening to you. Learned a lot. And yes, go ahead and give Arthur some love in the chat if you enjoyed the session. We appreciate that. We do appreciate you so much for joining us today. Do connect with us on social media. If you have any additional questions, we would love to answer those via email for you. We definitely want to provide some additional support to you. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Arthur, thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Julia. You've been amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Bye, everyone.